Welcome back to another Clifton Cameras review. Today we're going to take a look at the Nikon Coolpix P1000. This camera picks up where the P900 left off with an additional 1000 millimeters in focal length, an upgraded EVF, and also the ability to shoot raw images. So what we've done today is we've come to Cheltenham, just as it's our nearest bustling metropolis, and it's also home to the highest viewpoint in Gloucestershire with Cleeve Hill. So what we're going to do is we're just going to roam around Cheltenham, use this camera in a variety of different settings, try and exploit the 3000 millimeter lens on top of Cleeve Hill, and show you some of the sample imagery and let you know what we think of the camera. So here's a good place to answer one of the questions that I have about this camera is how does it deal with low light situations? It's a pretty bright day outside, so we've come across this bridge in the center of Cheltenham on the Honeybourne line where people use to create a lot of graffiti art. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and take a few photos right in the middle of this bridge just to see how it deals with being in the dark. I've just got it on aperture priority and I'm just shooting at like 1/15 of a second handheld and f2.8 to try and let as much light in as possible. Okay, so I've just discovered it's not a touchscreen, which would have been a useful feature, but that's okay. In place of touchscreen functionality, we've been given this 24 to 3000 lens, so you've got to have some trade-offs and some compromises. I'll just demonstrate the rest of the menu while I'm here. You've got a shooting menu, pretty standard functionality there. Movie, 5 options there. Network, 6, I can't count, 8. And then your setup. And that's it. It keeps it pretty simple, which I can appreciate that. Sometimes when you go to a restaurant, you're given a massive menu, you don't really know what to choose from. It's kind of like that, I suppose. It's a simple camera. I mean, it is a simple camera, I'll give it that. Ease of use is great. I've assigned the ISO to the control ring on the front of the camera just because the 2 back wheels are occupied by shutter speed and aperture. But the great thing about it is if you want to change your ISO, you can just switch the control ring, well, just to, twist it a little bit, and the ISO, all the menu, the display shows up on the inside of the EVF, so you don't have to take your eye away from the camera while you're shooting, which is useful. Go to 800, and I'm just going to take a series of shots with varying ISOs, getting lower and lower over the course of time, just so that we can demonstrate what they look like and how much noise you can expect to see from each setting. And they are getting darker and darker, of course. Gentleman over there is cutting down some trees, so I apologize for the noise. So let's talk about this lens just a little bit here. We've already mentioned the fact that it's a 24 to 3000 millimeter lens. The variable aperture on it is f2.8 to a max of 8 all the way at the end of the focal range. To be expected, this thing is it's enormous, do you know what I mean? It is comprised of 17 elements, 5 ED elements, and 1 super ED element to help you deal with diffraction, chromatic aberration, etc., especially, things that you're going to need to compensate for when you're shooting at 3000 millimeters. You have got a whole lot of atmosphere between yourself and your subject at that point, and that is one of the things that makes me wonder how well are these raw files going to do and how much extra clarity are we going to be able to get out of them when you're shooting through such a complex piece of glass at such a long distance. I mean, at that point we're talking, are we getting the curvature of the earth? I don't know, but you're certainly going to get some of those heat waves and some smog, you know what I mean? If you're, especially in somewhere like the Big Smoke, if you're in London or something like that, there's going to be such a haze in front of the camera. So how much clarity and how much sharpness are you really going to be able to bring back using those raw files in post? Well, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll find out. So yeah, we've taken a pit stop at Boston Tea Party in town, and what I wanted to do here was actually not only get a refreshment, but also test the macro capabilities of this camera. Apparently this lens will focus within 1 centimeter of the front focal element. How useful that is, I don't actually know, because at that point, you're probably getting some shadow from either the lens hood or the lens itself. So the real utility of that, I'm not sure, but it really isn't a do-it-all sort of camera lens. What's going on? We've had nothing but buses and beeping and construction today. It's turned out to be much more difficult to do this review than we thought. Right, so let's try this macro close-up situation here. I'm gonna get real tight in here to Andy's pain au chocolat. So yeah, ultra close. It's very impressive. Am I going to stick this in the coffee, Andy? You're going to have to tell me.
No, you're actually quite a way off, mate.
Am I?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Good, because I've extended the focal length a bit. Let's take it back in. But see, like, I can shoot this now, and it's focusing great, which is phenomenal, and you'll see this on the images.
You still got a good 5 centimeters.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, I've got, like, there's like a lens shadow there, so I guess if we bring it out a little bit. Like that. It's quite nice. So yeah, excellent macro capabilities with this lens. Yeah, thus far it's been, you know, quite a lot of fun to shoot with. It really is a do-it-all camera. The real test will be when we get on top of Cleve Hill and we zoom in town and we can pick out the individual pores on people's faces. We might even be able to reach across the channel with this thing from there. I don't know. Andy, I think you can enjoy your pain au chocolat now.
Awesome, thank you.
We're just headed over to the promenade, and I'm going to see how. I mean, I suppose it's supposed to be a travel camera, right? Despite its massive size, I'm not going to pretend like this thing's not enormous. I mean, look at this thing. It's huge. So what we're going to do is, it's just nowhere near as discreet. So, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we tried the Leica M10P, and the focus of that camera, not that this is in any way comparable, but is sort of discreet street photography. As a travel camera, I think you kind of want to get some street photography out of it, but this thing's just so damn big. But I'm gonna see what I can get away with. I mean, a lot of people don't react when you take a photo on the street anyway, but it's definitely not the most, you know what I mean? Like, how can you not see this thing coming? I suppose the good thing about this camera though is that VR, 5 stops of VR stabilization, I don't actually even need to be that close to somebody to take a photo of them on the street, so maybe it is better at street photography than I initially suspected, because I can hit that guy over there. Let's take a look. If we go around this side of this tree. So I'm here, right? And that gentleman over there is playing Hallelujah out front of House of Fraser. He's not even gonna know that I'm taking this photo. I'm impressed. All right. So maybe it is a little better at street photography than I initially gave it credit for. However, there was one point where he did look over here, and I'm pretty sure it's because of that. So this is 3,000 millimeters right here. This camera also has a digital function which will double that focal length to 6,000 millimeters. What? What? Why is that necessary? As far as I can tell, the image quality is great. The EVF is upgraded. I think that was one of the main gripes on the P900 was the fact that the electronic viewfinder wasn't very good. But this EVF is now, I can't remember what it is. I think it's like a 2.36 thousand, you know, 2.3, what was that, million? Yeah. 2 million dot EVF, just above there, 2.3, something like that. and it's very good. You get the full display in the EVF as well, which was something that was really useful earlier when I was in the tunnel shooting that graffiti. I can see what I'm doing with the ISO as I'm changing it, and it, you know, it will show you sort of what's happening as you're changing the settings on the camera too. But I mean, immediately as I review the image after shooting it through this electronic viewfinder, I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing. Some of the features I wanted to try next are the video features on the P1000. Now, this camera will shoot 4K UHD and a couple of 1080p options, which we're gonna test out here. It will shoot 4K, well, it will shoot any video up to 29 minutes in length or until you hit the 4 GB file limit. So those are your two options. The thing about this camera that I'm kind of surprised to see that other cameras don't have, that we appreciate as content creators, it's actually got a mic jack, which is seems like highly unusual to me. But I mean, that could be, I mean, it's got a mic jack and it's also got an articulating screen. So we'll do maybe an autofocus demonstration at some point as well, just to see how well that autofocus does. But those are two features that could make this camera quite handy for, you know, for making videos. One other thing I just briefly forgot to mention about the video capabilities of this camera is it actually comes with a stereo mic, which is something that I think people who shot with the P900 previously are quite excited to see how well that stereo mic works. So altogether, decent video functionality on this bridge camera. Yeah, let's see how it looks and how it sounds. It's such a huge focal range that, yeah, I don't know if you're really going to be able to reliably let autofocus do its thing all the way from 24 to 3000 and anywhere in between. So luckily you can just switch it over to manual focus, and the camera has focus peaking to help you figure out exactly what's in focus and what's not in focus. So I'm just going to take some 1080p footage of these guys. I don't know what they're doing, but they're just hanging out in the park over here. This is 1080 at 25, and then I'll do some 4K at 30, and you guys can take a look and see how that looks. Taking a little 4K flower footage. Actually, Andy brought up a good point. Maybe we'll try and shoot 4K video using the macro option that the lens has. I think that could be quite interesting, if it's something that works anyways. See how close we can get. Let's try this. Yo! Oh, this is heavy. Okay, so this is probably not a sustainable vlogging camera, but because it's got the functionality, I feel like we should try it out. So we've got the we actually put the Rode mic on top of the P1000, shooting in 4K 25. Andy and I need to cruise back and get another memory card and a battery.
And then a memory card and battery. Yeah, we're spending more time in Cheltenham than first thought.
Yeah, it's actually quite a fun camera to shoot with. But whoa, my arm is already burning. I can feel the lactic acid building up as I speak. It is quite a heavy camera, so the P900 weighs significantly less and is actually significantly smaller. This camera weighs, I think it weighs a full ½ kilo more, so an extra 500 grams. That's about an extra pound. Yeah, so we're gonna go back, grab another battery. Also, something I should maybe say about this camera is the battery life is a SEPA rated 250 shots, which is probably going to vary depending on what you're shooting and what your usage is. We're shooting in 4K right now using the video functionality, and that's going to reduce battery life significantly. It's kind of surprising because for such a massive camera body, the battery's actually quite small, but you got to try it for yourself and figure out what you're actually going to get out of it in real-time usage. But yeah, we've done some testing of the camera around Cheltenham Town Centre today, but the real feature of this camera is that 3000mm focal length. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it up Cleve Hill, which is actually Gloucestershire's highest point, and use that vista looking over Cheltenham to test the 3000mm focal length of this camera. It also has a digital feature, which I'm not entirely sure how to access yet, but that will double that focal length of 3000 millimeters and give us 6000 millimeters. So I think a good test of that would be to take it to the top of Cleve Hill and pick out some landmark spots in Cheltenham and see how close we can get to them using this lens. And his small child sitting on a bench over there. I would never be able to tell you that looking at that thing from here, but I can actually tell you that he's wearing a brown shirt, blue jeans, and she's got a green cup, a pink jacket with like some floral patterning on it. I can tell you that much information about that location over there. So we found our sort of ideal vantage point here atop Cleve Hill. So what we're gonna do is just take some stabilized photos at, well, the furthest reaches that this camera can get. Tip here with landscape photography and long focal lengths. Either get the camera actually comes with I think a Bluetooth remote. And you can,
accessory, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an optional accessory. It doesn't come with the camera, but if you are going to pick this camera up, I highly recommend buying it, because when you're shooting at 3000 mils, my option right now is you can always do this as well. Use the self timer and set it, but it's going to pick up any camera shake you get from pressing the shutter. I think a lot of people probably already know that, but there is a remote that you can get for the camera where you can trigger it sort of remotely, control, zoom, record, things like that. So even the wind as it stood here right now is just ever so slightly kind of shaking the frame a bit. Anyways, I'm going to take some more sample sort of images just from here, show you the distance of, you know, how far you can reach with this thing in ideal conditions. I mean, the day is pretty clear with very little movement. You can reach miles with this thing. Something I wanted to mention before we go was not only the programmable control ring on the camera, so when you're shooting in autofocus, you can use it to control things like ISO, various other sort of functionality programmable through the menu. The ISO range of this camera, well, something we haven't touched on. The ISO range of the camera is, I think it goes all the way up to 6400, so you're working with 100 to 6400 ISO range. And this will be the interesting part, when we pull these images out of the camera, the sensor in this camera is only a 1/2 inch sensor, which is something that you would traditionally use, and it has been traditionally used in small, compact, pocket-sized travel cameras, the kind of thing you would take away on your family holidays. So I don't know, you know, combine the raw functionality of the camera with a 1/2 inch sensor. I'm going to pull them out later and edit them a little bit in Lightroom. I'll put them through sort of posts, and we'll see what kind of image quality we get out of these, and what the upper end of that sort of, if I can sharpen them any more than they already are. So next landmark of choice is Eagle Tower. Many people from this area will know what that is. It's just this hideous building built I'm assuming it's like it was built in the 70s sometime, and it just dominates the Cheltenham sort of skyline sort of something that applies to a city, doesn't it? Not necessarily a town, but it's just this one massive skyscraper type of building in the center of town. One big block of ugly. So that was, as you can probably tell by my outfit, we're a couple of days on now, so we've had time to reflect on the P1000. My conclusion with this camera is that it's a good camera, and it does a little bit of everything, and it does it quite well. But it's probably not something that I would use, or I don't know if many people would use in a professional sense. But then that is entirely up to you how you decide to use this camera. We were astounded by the wide range of features that it carries, especially things like the mic jack, 4K recording, and the VR. Something I did want to mention about the vibration reduction system within this camera is that it does not work when you're recording in 4K, but it does work when you're recording in 1080p. That about wraps it up for the Nikon P1000. If you enjoyed this review, we know it's been a long slog, but if you did enjoy it and you're still with us, if you could please subscribe to the channel for future Clifton Cameras content and give us a like, that would be fantastic. You can find the P1000 on our website. We'll leave that link in the description. Take it easy.